Now, you might be thinking, I don't want to manage a team that big, and that's totally fine. Stay in production. Understand that you are not growing a true business that will run without you. You are building a very high paying job, and there's nothing wrong with that. Build an actual business that one day can run without you, that can generate cash flow, that doesn't blow up because you go on vacation. Getting out of production is one of the most dangerous things a team leader can actually do, especially if you haven't vetted your team without your production. I personally got out of production at the end of 2021 when in that year I did $780,000 in GCI. That was my second full year. And I have been able to stay out of production ever since. I was also able to cash flow a buyout of my business partner while staying out of production. So in this episode, I'm going to walk through the process of getting out of production without going out of business. And this podcast is specifically for team leaders and maybe broker owners. And this is the documenting process of building Onyx Homes, my real estate team. And if you want the closest possible look at this kind of journey, you can join our free community by going to onyxhomes.com/school. Link will be in the description, so you can check that out. Now, getting into the content itself, the goal is to be able to follow this 5-step blueprint of getting out of production and building a profitable team. Now, I'll preface this whole entire thing by saying that if you like being in production, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I think a lot of people rush to get out of production when they maybe like selling, or they don't really want to build a true business out of their real estate team. They just like production and like selling and want to have a team as well too. But I will also say that a lot of the content that'll be in this particular episode will pertain the same if you want to stay in production. So the only thing that would really change is where I say stop selling to get out of production is just keep selling. So here are the 5 steps, and I'm going to break these down into way more detail. This is going to be like a very tactical, action-packed might be the wrong way to say it. Very tactical episode of how to actually do this. So the step number 1 is to separate your personal production and your team's numbers. Then run your numbers as if you're an agent on the team. That is step number 1. Step number 2 is to fix the financial model of your team. Step number 3, this is where you will find your target agent count so that you can get out of production. Step number 4 is to bring on a production partner, which we will go in depth what that actually is. That's a huge part of being able to get out of production without going out of business. Step number 5, recruit, train, and retain until you're at your target agent count, and then get out of production if you want at that point. Okay, so let's go into detail. Step number 1, you need to separate your personal production from your team's production. So in my experience talking to most team leaders, your personal production is likely a huge chunk of the business. Now, your business could look all over the spectrum. I would say the majority of smaller teams, the team leader is 50% of more or of the production, or significantly more sometimes, to where the team leader might be 75% of the production of the team. But the goal, regardless of whatever it is, you just need to separate the production. That's step number 1. Here's how you should separate it. I would just grab a sheet of paper and I would draw a line down the middle, and I would do it this way. The best way to do it is the actual GCI or revenue that is generated on either side. So for example, if you were doing $500,000 in GCI and your team was doing $500,000 in GCI for $1 million total GCI, you would want to break it down by GCI. The middle way to do this is how much volume. So again, if it's you did 50 million in volume and your team did 50 million in volume, and that gets you to 100, I would take your volume times your average team commission. And the worst way to do this is deal count. So for example, you might do 50 deals, your team might do 50 deals. However, what is very likely to happen, now let me take one step back, is the best way to do this is actual dollars generated. And the reason I say that, but the reason I give a couple other examples, the reason I say that is obviously that's the best, actual dollars generated. The reason that I say that is most team leaders that are in this position don't have very good numbers. So best is out actual revenue. Middle of the road is like, okay, how much volume did each do times your average commission for the team? And then the worst way to do it is deal count. Here's 3 major reasons why. One is your team will likely have a much lower average price point than you personally do. The second one is if you were to pass the leads instead of going to you to your team, they are likely to miss the highest price deals, and they are likely to have a lower average commission percentage than you will. I imagine you're the best salesperson on your team, which is why you're the team leader. It's why it's your team. I would assume. So most of the time they will have a lower average price point. They're going to miss the highest price deals, and they're going to have a lower average commission. There's nothing wrong with that. You are who you are for a reason. And you're going to have to pay them 50% or whatever the commission splits are to actually do that. So there's no wonder most team leaders have to get directly right back into production after getting out of production. It's because they really haven't done the math on their personal production running it through the team. So here's how you should actually do this. Now, whether you get out of production or not is a totally different story, but here's how you should do this. Is whatever your compensation model is for your agents, meaning if you were an agent on your team, how would you get paid? And then pay yourself that way. So if your team is 50% split on everything, just to make it simple and easy, then when you do a deal, whether it's wherever the deal comes from, if that's your compensation model for your team, then you should pay yourself 50% of the commission, and then you should have to run the business off of the rest. This is step number 1 in doing this. Now, the reason for this is I want you to pull that money out of the business and literally put it in your personal account so that 1, you have an income still, and 2, so that you are forced to run the team based on the lower amount of revenue, or I should say the lower amount of gross profit is really what it is. This will help you start to run the business better and you're going to find out probably very quickly, especially if you are a large percentage of the revenue, you're going to realize how much money gets pulled out of the business. Also, if maybe you're not as big of a large part of the revenue, it's really going to highlight how different the economics are in the business without it. That's really the goal. Now, my advice here is to do this today. Don't wait. Literally, right now, pause this episode, write down on a piece of paper how much revenue did you generate on one side, how much revenue did your team generate on the other side, and then today, find the way to make you get paid as a salesperson based on whatever your splits would be. The rest of the gross profit stays in the business accounts. And if you're not running business accounts for your team, I should probably do another episode on that, but I'm just going to assume that you are. Okay. Number 2 is you are going to fix the financial model of your team. The number 1 biggest mistake that most team leaders have made, myself very much included, is your financial model just straight up doesn't make sense. Meaning that if you did twice as many deals, you would still have a pain point because of how the compensation you have structured in your team just doesn't make sense. And most teams do this because they just copy other people and they don't really know why things are the way they are. And most teams are unprofitable. And if they are profitable, it's very, 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 very low margins. But again, most teams, the team itself, again, you took that paper and you drew a line in the middle, the team itself loses money, and the team leader, your production keeps everybody in business. So for example, in 2021, when I sold $780,000 in GCI, I took $680,000 of that and fed the business, right? So I took almost all of my revenue was going back into my team that was not profitable. Now, again, that's why I make this content, is because nobody should do that. I had so much terrible advice that led to those decisions, and maybe maybe people told me not to do that and I just didn't listen. But that was an incredibly painful time, and I don't want you to have to go through that. And I know so many team leaders, some of the biggest names in my marketplace, I've talked to about this, where they're feeding 20, 30 grand a month into their team. And it's like, why don't we just blow the team up and stop losing 30 grand a month? It's like you either have to choose to run it as a business and sell, and you're probably going to have to hire somebody to you're going to have to hire somebody to run the business, or you get out of production and you run the business. But running a team that loses money without your sales it doesn't make any sense at all. And so many people get stuck in running a team for the sake of having a team. I think it's crazy. Okay, anyway, so fixing your financial model, I covered at length in episode number 2 of the podcast. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend going back and watching that if you feel like the numbers in your business don't make sense. And how I explain this to try to visualize this as best as possible is you cannot outwork a bad financial model. If the numbers in your business don't make sense, I don't care if you're working 200 hours a week, it's not going to make a difference. You might have to scale 50 to 100 times larger than you currently are for a bad financial model to start to make sense. So go back to episode number 2 and watch the episode on your financial model. But I'm not going to go in as much detail. I'm going to talk about this though. So most real estate teams have no chance of being profitable, as I've said. Many team leaders get stuck thinking they have to have their team. So let me give a very, very real example. Let's say you're making $500,000 in income as a salesperson with your team, and you would like to be able to replace that of you selling. You'd like to keep your income at $500,000, and you want your team to generate enough profit so that you don't have to sell anymore, and your business, your team generates $500,000 in profits, $500,000. Okay, here's your different examples. First, before we dive into 2 examples I'll give you, the question you have to answer is, which business model do you have? Or which business model maybe are you building towards? But which business model do you have? Answer that question. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, again, episode 2 is where I would say to go first. Pause this, go watch episode 2, come back to this. So I'm going to break down the 2 most common teams that people want to build. Number 1 is a traditional team. And the cliff notes of a traditional team is the team pays for pretty much everything. The agents are on 50% or lower splits, regardless of where the lead comes from. So a well-run traditional team will make a 20% profit margin off of top line GCI. Top line. Not after the broker gets paid, not after top line GCI. 20% profit margins off top line GCI or top line revenue. Meaning that in a traditional team model, and then remember the goal is to generate $500,000 in take-home income or EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, etc. Your team, without your production, without you selling, would have to do $2.5 million in revenue. So example number 1, if you want your team to generate you $500,000 of income, your team would need, on a 20% profit margin, that means you'd have to sell $2.5 million in revenue, top line GCI, revenue, top line, running on 20% margins. That's traditional team. On a TeamRage, a very well-run TeamRage will have about a 10% profit margin, meaning that if you want to get to $500,000 in profit, you're going to have to do $5 million in revenue. So mind you, the financial model is incredibly important. The TeamRage has to be twice as big as the traditional team. And you can get a traditional team to 30% profit margins. But a TeamRage is going to be really hard, if not impossible, to get to a 20% profit margin. So the next question is, what does your business need to look like in order to get there? So you plug in your own numbers. Here's the formula. You take how much money you want to make divided by the likely profit margin of your business. And not the profit margin you have now, but the profit margin of the model you want. So if you want to do a traditional team, I would say to run it off a 20% profit margin. If you want to run it off a TeamRage, I would say do a 10% profit margin and then go from there. The next step, like I said, is to figure out how do you get your business model there, or like what does your actual business model need to look like? So find your target agent count in order to get out of production. Why do I say target agent count? It's because there's so much proof around these stats. So you will hear all kinds of stuff around this topic. I'm going to give you benchmarks that I have found very realistic in my team over 5 years. I will give you the same benchmark based on talking to dozens and dozens and dozens of other team leaders in all markets all over the country, as these are kind of really, really good rule of thumb benchmarks. Now, if you're running a really, really small team, meaning like less than 12, you are going to be tempted to use way bigger numbers than these because you might have a handful of agents that crush. And you're going to be tempted to do that, but I'm going to tell you not to. I'm going to beg you, please do not use these crazy numbers, because it's going to give you a distorted vision of the reality. So they're likely, this is kind of a side note here, those agents that are crushing on your team are likely crushing because of them. We want to think that it's because of us and how wonderful we are, but it's very, very likely that they're crushing with you and they would crush with any other team that they were with. And they're not the average, right? You might just have a few exceptional performers. But anyway, here are the benchmarks that I would suggest to use. $90,000 in GCI, or top line revenue, per agent to your team. This averages the guys that crush, the gals that crush, and the agent that joins your team and doesn't sell anything. That's why I want to use this number and not the average of your top performers, because they're not all top performers. By the definition of top performer is they're the top. You want to take the average of the dead weight. That might be rough, but it's true. The person who joins your team and never sells anything, the middle of the road agent that kind of works but not really and does a few deals, and the rainmakers, the ones that crush. You want to average all of that out. I suggest using the benchmark if an agent is going to generate you on average $90,000 in GCI. This is true in my team with my market of $1.1 million average price point. This is true with my team, with my buddies who run teams of $250,000 average price points. Again, I've talked to tons of people. This is the number that I would use. And after you pay the agent, on average, you're going to be left with about $30,000 in gross profit. So $90,000 in top line, $30,000 to maybe $40,000 in gross profit. And it could be more or less depending on your financial model, right? Your splits to your agents is going to dramatically affect this. Dramatically meaning like somewhere between 30 to 50,000 in gross profit. Okay. If you're running an established team, so this is the benchmark is 90,000. If you're running an established team and you have 10 or more agents, take the actual average. So take the 2 agents that are the top producers that probably do half the business for the team, and then take the bottom third who doesn't sell anything. You get the point, right? Take all 10, average it out. And if it's way above the benchmark, then use the benchmark. If it's way below the benchmark, because you might be in a position like I was in 21, where I had a really, really low producing team because I hired a lot of the wrong people. So if your number is above 90,000 by a little bit, use it. If it's way, way, way above, don't use it. If it's way below 90,000, use the benchmark because we need to fix the team. Okay, $90,000 per year. Got it. Now remember the examples from before, right? The traditional team running 20% profit margins that needs to do $2.5 million in revenue. And the TeamRage, I'm getting my hands mixed up if you're watching videos. So the traditional team that has to make $500,000 in profit, 20% profit margins, we need to do $2.5 million in revenue. Okay. And on the TeamRage model, we want to make $500,000 profit with a 10% profit margin. We need to do $5 million in revenue. Okay. So for the traditional team to hit $2.5 million in revenue based on that $90,000 benchmark, you need 28 agents. Now, if you're not good at math, I highly recommend writing this down. Here's your formula. You take the number of, like, how much profit do you want divided by your likely profit margin. So in this first example of a traditional team, 500,000 or whatever your number is divided by 20%, so 0.2. So 500,000 divided by 0.2 equals 2.5 million in revenue. So you take that 2.5 million in revenue divided by the $90,000 per agent, which tells us how many agents we need in order to get to that business. So for the traditional team, it's somewhere in the ballpark of 28 agents to make out $500,000 in revenue. And on a TeamRage with a 10% profit margin to make a $500,000 profit, you're going to need 5 million in revenue, and you're going to need, divided by 90,000 per agent, is 55 agents. So use this formula so that you can figure out how many agents you're likely going to need on your team. Now, you might be thinking, I don't want to manage a team that big, and that's totally fine. My advice to you, stay in production. If you don't want to manage a team that big, you are very, 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 very likely to just continue to stay in production. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just understand, this is the underlined part, understand that you are not growing a true business that will run without you. You are building a very high paying job. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know tons of team leaders that like selling and they look at their team as additional income that they otherwise wouldn't have got. That's fine. My goal for this particular episode and for most of the conversations that I talk about is to build an actual business that one day can run without you, that can generate cash flow, that doesn't blow up because you go on vacation. That's a lot of the content that I'm talking about. And if that's not what you want to do, you're going to get a lot of valuable stuff from this. But what I'm talking about right now, you're going to be like, I don't want 30 agents. That's not a small traditional team. And the reality is it is. So that might be what you're saying. Or you might be asking, how am I going to get my team that big, regardless of what your size is, which is going to bring us to the next step. So this is step number 4. So if you want to stay in production, this is going to be super valuable. So stay along for this. If you want to get out of production, this is like required. Now, I will say this. I did not personally do this. My business partner, before I bought him out of the business, he did this, and it worked incredibly well. But I personally did not use a production partner getting out of production, and it cost me, I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last handful of years. Now I have a production partner, even though I spend 0% of my time on sales. But that's besides the point. So step number 4 is to bring on a production partner. A production partner is not a licensed assistant. It is not an assistant. A production partner is a salesperson that is married to you and your business. I did not come up with this concept. I learned it from an agent that crushes in my marketplace. Shout out to Jimmy Reed. He broke down his entire thing, and we have very minorly tweaked how we run this. So if you're going to find that agent who's married to you and your business, you're going to find an agent that wants these 3 things. They're going to want to learn from a rock star like yourself. So part of the reason why somebody would want to be your production partner is literally just so they can watch somebody very, very closely and learn incredibly fast. This person's going to be exposed to all the deals you do and all the deals they do, which is way more than they would ever do on their own, at least right now. That's number 1, is learn from somebody like you. Number 2 is they want consistent income. They're probably tired of riding the real estate roller coaster where they sell 2 houses 1 month and 0 for the next 6 months. They want more of a consistent income, but they really like being a real estate agent. Number 3 is they're more of a gatherer, less of a hunter, meaning they don't want to lead generate. They don't like having uncomfortable conversations, and they're probably not the best, or they don't enjoy the closing negotiation side of the business. They like doing everything else. And here's how you structure this, right? So that's who you're looking for, is that personality type. They also don't want to make all the money in the world, right? Believe it or not everybody is like you that needs money like they need fresh air. Not everybody's like that. So they want to make a modest living. They want to make a good living, but they don't want to do those things that really, really, really drive revenue like you do. And that's fine. So here's how you structure this. All of your deals are your deals, just like they are now. All of their deals are your deals. So if I'll say Sally is your production partner or Bob is your production partner, they go out and they find they are a salesperson also. So if they go out and they find 10 deals, they are your clients, your 10 deals. They might get those from their SOI. They might get those from doing the open houses, whatever. But their 10 deals and your 50 deals are all your 60 deals. Okay? They're all yours. You're not helping them build their personal production. You're not helping them build a book. They are helping you sell more houses. They are helping you build a bigger book of business. They're helping you be at 2 places at once. So here's how you break down the compensation. Is you could do all commission, which is what I prefer, or you can do a salary plus commission. I'm in California. I certainly prefer anytime I can do all commission. I certainly try to. And I also would rather this person be all commission because, one, if you're in this position where you're thinking about getting out of production, you probably do a very consistent level of business where they might as well be on a salary. You've probably done the level of business you've done consistently over the last handful of years. So they're getting the certainty of that. but they're making a percentage of all the deals you do, right? Is what I'm getting at. Or you can do a salary with a smaller commission. Again, I would rather somebody have a higher upside and no base salary, just going off the commissions. But that's totally up to you. You can do it either way. And I'm going to share with you how you get to the commission percentage or amount, whatever. So you pay them a percentage on every single deal you do, and they make that same percentage on every deal they bring in as well too. This is one of the reasons I like it to be commission only percentage based, is that percentage is larger than if they had a salary. So on any deal they bring in, they're making a percentage of that deal as well too, as opposed to like a salary plus a small percentage. They're getting a bigger chunk of that business too. Okay, so let's say here is how you find that number. Now, there's probably several parts in this where you're going to be like, what did he just like? You're probably going to rewind and literally take notes through this, so that you can have all the details as well too. So here's how you find that number. You're going to start with the end number of how much money does this person need to make, right? This is going to be a huge range likely, but like, what is the most like you're going to want to base this off not what the numbers you really want to hit, the numbers like you pretty much know you're going to hit. So let's just say for this conversation, this production partner wants to make $65,000 a year. Again, they're not like you. They don't need to make $500,000. So they want to make $65,000. And let's stay with the same example that you want to make $500,000 in GCI for your sales. You're going to take the number they want to make divided by your GCI, and that will give you a percentage. So for example, if you pull up your calculator right now and you typed in 65,000 divided by 500,000. So if you took the number they want to make versus the number you're going to make, that will give you a percentage. It'll say 0.13, right? 65,000 divided by 500,000 is 0.13 whatever, which is 13%. So what that means is on every deal you do, you're going to make whatever you make, and your production partner is going to make 13% of every deal. Now, if you're saying, hey, Christian, this is a lot of money, I'm going to get to that in a minute, right? You're taking that money off your plate. Yeah, we're going to get there in a minute. You could also do this, which I don't recommend this. You could also do a dollar amount per deal, especially if you're really high in price points. That might not be a bad idea. Again, my price points are $1.1 million, and I would not do this. I have a friend that does this. He chose to do $1 per deal and a salary, and he effectively has an assistant. He does not have a salesperson production partner. I want my production partner also selling. I want my production partner doing open houses every weekend, and then which is diving into dividing up the responsibilities. So here are the responsibilities of the production partner. They're responsible for, and this is just some things, but all showings, notes on meetings. So if you are both going on a showing, you are leading and that person's taking notes. They are scheduling everything. They're going to all of the inspections. They're doing all of the real estate agent activities, except your responsibilities are to negotiate, generate leads, get contracts signed, and have the hard conversations. Your job is to negotiate deals, generate leads, get contracts signed, have hard conversations. The short version of this, you generate and convert the leads. They do everything else until the deal closes. And I have a direct quote from my buddy here, right? But first, the goal is for you to remove yourself completely from 99% of the physical meetings with clients. These are the really low leverage things like going out to showings, driving to the house for the inspections. All of these different things are very low leverage and you don't need to be there. So this allows you to handle more clients at once. It allows you to leverage your time so that you can focus on growing your team. That's the whole point of the production partner, is they're going to take off probably 70 or 80% of the real estate agent activities off your plate. And you're going to free that up for, if you want to stay in production, to sell more houses. Or you're going to free that up so that you can use that time to grow your team. This is what I wish I would have done. I would have still stayed in production after 2021 instead of going from 780,000 to basically zero. I still did probably 200, but I could have kept I probably could have kept or grown that $780,000 in GCI that I did in 21, also in 22, would have made my business a hell of a lot easier to run. But I chose to just totally stop selling. If I would have brought a production partner in, I could have at least maintained that level of GCI and had another $500,000 into the business. I wish I would have done that. So the goal is to get you out of doing the physical stuff so that you can generate more deals, or so that you can spend more time growing your actual business. Okay, here's a story. So I have a buddy who I begged for 2 years to hire a production partner, and he finally did. This is a direct quote that he texted me a few months ago. This is towards the end of the year in 24. This is in 2024. He was telling his team's production. He led the way with 103 transactions in 2024. Almost all of that was my production partner. I sold more homes this year that I never stepped foot in than homes that I actually viewed in person. He sold more homes that he never saw in person than homes that he actually saw in person. 103, meaning more than 52 of the homes they sold, he never stepped foot in. That is the leverage you get from a production partner. I would venture to say he should have 2. This is why it is so incredibly important to have a production partner. And he wants to stay in production. He runs a brokerage. Shout out Brian Worst, you crush. Runs a brokerage, runs a team, and sells 103 homes a year. And he was able to do that this year because, not able to do that like he crushed before, but he was able to do way more in his actual business and kept all of the production. So, the idea here, so you mentioned earlier, I could read your mind and your thinking, but Christian, I'm going to have to give up this big slice of business, and I don't know if I want to do that. I'm going to challenge your mindset. This person if you're staying in production, this person should help you grow your business by more than the percentage you're paying them. Example, if I want to make $500,000, they want to make $65,000, I'm paying them 13%. This person should bring in way more than $65,000 in additional revenue. There's 2 different ways they can do that. They can do that by you being more efficient, meaning you can focus more of your time on lead generation and converting and closing so that you do an extra however many deals 65,000 is, or they bring in deals. So in our market, an average commission check, let's just say it's $20,000 for round numbers. I need my production partner to do 5 deals a year they need to bring 5 deals to the table that I close for me to make up that difference. And that's to be broken even. The likelihood is you are likely to grow your business by about 50% by bringing in a production partner and paying them 13 or whatever the percentage number is. It's ballpark 15% usually. If you're making tons of GCI, you're likely going to need multiple production partners. If you're in a really, really high price point, the more GCI you generate, the lower their percentage needs to be. So in this circumstance, if this isn't the goal, right? So if I would have had a production partner when I jumped out of production, I could have kept at least 50% of my, let's just say I did 780,000. If I had had a production partner, I could have kept that somewhat similar. And if I would have spent 0 time in it, I probably could have kept $500,000 of that 780 and just stayed steady with that. Instead, I jumped completely out and basically lowered gross profit, not revenue, gross profit by $780,000. If I would have had a production partner, I would have probably had another $500,000 to run the business with, which would have made getting out of production a whole heck of a lot easier, which is why I'm making this for you today. So this is coming to the end here. If you're going to stay in production and you want to grow a business, this is really fun because you have way more money to do it with. It's hard to get out of production and grow the business. This is where you're going to be working 2 jobs. You're going to be selling and you're going to be the CEO of a startup. But if you like selling and you want to keep selling, then somebody else has to grow the business if you want to grow that. The likelihood of you being able to do both really, really well is unlikely and probably rather unsustainable. I can tell you from experience. But you could hire somebody, not a production partner, right? You can hire a person, hire a team leader, really more of a sales manager probably, but hire a team leader, pay them on growing the business. And then they can do all the things we talk about in these podcasts and these channels so that your team grows. Maybe at some point you can just jump completely out of sales, let this other person keep growing the business, and you are a business owner as opposed to the CEO in the business that you own. This brings us to step number 5, which is recruit, train, and retain until you get to your target agent count. What I mean by this is if you've done what we just went through, right? Step number 1 is you separate your personal production from the team members. Step number 2 is you fix the financial model of your team. You get your team to where it actually will make sense. Go to episode 2 for that. Step number 3 is you find your target agent count so that you know where you're going to be able to get out of production. You stay in production here. You bring on a production partner, and this is going to take time to find, time to train, right? We're talking a 6-month transition, maybe 1 year maximum. You bring on your production partner so that you can take 70% of the real estate agent job off your plate. Production partner does the stuff that's not closing or lead generating or converting. And then you can put that 70% extra time or whatever time you unlocked into recruiting, training, and retaining agents until you get to your target agent count. Now, here's what's really crazy is once you get to your target agent count, if you keep your production and your team generates the amount of profit that you wanted to make, right? Because we used math to get to that. We didn't pull a number out of a hat. You're making more money than you wanted to make in the first place. Now, if at this point you wanted to completely shut down your production or just have a production partner run with it, you can do that. This is what I actually did. It took me 1 year to get from out of production to ideal agent count. 1 year to go from making $780,000 in GCI and losing 600 of that, like paying my team 600,000, to 1 year later fixing most of the financial model and growing, training, recruiting, training, and retaining, can't even talk, agents to get to the target agent count. That took me 1 year. And from here, we're looking at growth, right? So you can do this in your business. I highly, highly, highly encourage you, if you're still in production, to hire a production partner. This whole podcast was a test, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done this when I started my team in the first place, and I would have been able to stock away a ton more money before really starting the team. So anyway, the goal here was to give you as much information of how you can transition out of production without going broke. And a lot of that is by fixing your financial model and hiring a production partner. If you want to get the closest possible look at my journey of growing my business, and if you want to get a free training on the financial model, how to pick, how to choose your financial model, and how to structure your team so that your financial model makes sense, I have this for free for you, available in our free school community. Just go to onyxhomes.com/school. That's school with a K, SKOOL. And you can join that community for free. Go to the classroom. There is a team building masterclass where the first few sections are unlocked for you. The scaling frameworks that we learned from Alex Ramosi, acquisition.com's workshops, and the choosing your financial model. There's a huge section in there that I made it free just because I think it's so incredibly important that I wanted to make sure I share that with you. But if you want to look at the closest look of us growing our company, go to onyxhomes.com/school. I share a lot of insights in there as well too. If you like this content, like, subscribe, do all the things. I make this because I wish I would have learned these lessons without going through them myself the hard way. Another episode down, and I will see you in the next one.